Welcome to Chasing Truth. I'm glad to be with you today, and I have a question. What two things did the New Testament church in the Apostolic era not have? What two things did the New Testament church not have in that Apostolic era? That's right, a church and a New Testament. There were no churches and there was no New Testament yet in that Apostolic era. The first Christians were Jews. They were Jewish believers in Messiah, and they gathered every week on Shabbat in the temple, in the synagogues. This is where they met and worshiped and grew in their faith in Messiah. And those Christian Gentiles, those early Christian Gentiles in that same apostolic period, when did they gather? On Sunday in a church reading a New Testament? Absolutely not. They also gathered on Shabbat with Jewish Christians in the synagogues weekly on Shabbat. Acts makes this very clear. In fact, let me read Acts 15, verses 19 through 21. This is the summary ruling from James and the apostles in Jerusalem with the elders that's going to govern the entire church. Now think about this. Verse 19, therefore it is my judgment that we do not trouble those who are turning to God from among the Gentiles, but that we write to them that they are to abstain from things contaminated by idols, and from fornication, and from what is strangled, and from blood. For Moses from ancient generations has in every city those who preach him, since he is read in the synagogues every Sabbath. If the Christians that were Gentiles were not gathering with believing Jews in the synagogues on Shabbat every week, this makes no sense. This ruling has no traction. It's actually irrelevant. What this tells us is that those early Gentile Christians were actually joining with Messianic Jews, believing Jews, and they were going to synagogue because there were no churches. They were going to synagogue, and that's where they heard Moses. And James is saying, look, they're going to catch all of the beauty and glory of the revelation of Messiah and how to live life in a way that's righteous and true by going every week on Shabbat to the synagogue with believing Jews. This is the brilliance of James, the apostles, and the elders. This is where we see the Gentiles coming into the olive tree of Israel. So what about the New Testament? The New Testament will not be written and canonized or accepted until about the 4th century. And so really it's about the year 400 that really kind of has some traction. In the meantime, what they have is the Tanakh. And the Tanakh is inspired. That Old Testament is actually relevant. It's inspired by God. Paul says that Old Testament is profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and training in right living, in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work. And Paul is writing this to Timothy, who's writing this to Gentiles, Gentile believers, not just Jewish believers, Gentile believers. Can you imagine that? Telling Gentile believers that the Old Testament is inspired and it's actually good for teaching, reproof, and correction and training in righteousness? An amazing idea. That's right. We're not a New Testament church. We are a Bible-believing group of people. That's right, connecting both the Tanakh with the New Testament. The New Testament, in closing, I just want to say, is the inspired and correct interpretation and application of the Tanakh. We have the entire Word of God now. And we have this great connection with Israel and the prophets and Moses. We have the fullness of the revelation of Messiah and how to live our lives in Him, both as Jews and Gentiles together in Messiah, that one new man. We are, in fact, what was promised to Abraham. Those Jewish people who believe in Messiah, along with the Gentiles from the nations who believe in Messiah. This is what was promised. This is what's coming to the fullness. This is what we have today. And I want to encourage you to embrace all of the Word of God, the entire Bible, and find your place in the olive tree of Israel. Together, we'll let our light shine, and together we will advance the agenda of Messiah for world redemption. So thanks for joining me today. Please subscribe to this channel, comment below, and if you have a chance, check us out at craftedin.com.